presentation ready, I'll call the meeting to order. Once a year I conduct the elections for the chairperson, vice chairperson, and a couple provincial representatives. And then once those elections are complete, the elected chair will take over the meeting and we'll have the student presentation then. So beginning with the chairperson, I'll be looking for, in each case I'll be looking for a nomination, acceptance of the nomination, acclamation or a vote, and then we'll move on to the next role. So beginning with the chairperson, is there a nomination for the person to sit as chair? Okay. Accept. I'll ask for nominations a second time. Asking for nominations a third time. Hearing none, Dale is acclaimed as chairperson. Congratulations. For the role of vice chair, nominations.
I'd like to put forward Jacqueline Miller.
Jacqueline, accept. Nominations a second time, third time. Hearing none, Jacqueline acclaimed as chair.
Thank you.
The provincial council representative for the CSTA, a nomination for the role.
I nominate Dale. I accept.
Second time, third time. Okay, Dale acclaimed as a provincial council representative. Congratulations. Finally, a representative to BCPC, nomination for someone to fill that role.
I nominate Rob.
And Rob accepting.
Yeah.
Second time, third time, Rob's acclaimed. Congratulations. My work is done.
Thank you, Steve. And thank you everyone for joining today. Just a quick note, we're meeting on the traditional territory of the Tla'amin Nation, where we are honored to live, work, and share educational experiences. Welcome everyone today. So first up we have Mr. Matt Hull here with some Henderson students. Welcome.
Thank you. Ready to start?
Yes,
Oh, I'd
please.
love to. Come on.
Scooter up.
Yeah, they scooter up and roll up. Oh, actually, they're walking. They did ask. Well, thank you for having us here today. I asked about a month ago, and we're going to talk about how we got here, about having some students come up and talk about what we have decided to do at Henderson Elementary. So it started at the beginning of the year. We started a student council at Henderson, and student council is comprised of grades 6, 7 students, and we kind of invited anyone who wanted to be involved in leadership. And so we had an election at the beginning of the year to say who wants to chair the meetings. And I told any of the kids who put their name in the hat that we were interested in their ideas, and even if they didn't get a chance. So one of the students who had put their hat in the ring was Gabriel. And so I said to Gabriel after the meeting, I said, Gabriel, what do you want to do for the school? What do you feel that students would benefit from? And this is what he came up with. So Gabriel, the first question that I wanted to ask you is, why scooters?
I chose to do a scooter park because I've been noticing that at our school we have many kids that are on scooters, all different kinds of scooters, skateboards, like there's many different kinds of just kids that ride things at our school. And I thought that it would be really cool if we could have a kind of thing that they could use to ride their scooters on. So like we have ramps and jumps that kids can use.
Excellent, very good. And so with Gabriel, so it was Gabriel's idea. He came to me and I said, I love it. Let's see what we can do. Let's come up with some ways. We did some planning. We talked about what would those costs be. What kind of equipment would we need? Some kids already bring their scooters, as he said, but sometimes we have kids that want to ride scooters, but they don't have any scooters. So we talked about what kind of equipment, and we're going to look at that in just a minute. With him as well is Evan. Evan is one of our resident semi-pro scooters. So Evan, for you, why do you enjoy scootering?
I like scootering because I think you can do like whatever trick you want.
So you feel comfortable with it?
Yeah.
Awesome. And it's really great kind of watching them as they flip around, and I'm always like, Yeah, my caution threshold's a bit higher than some of them. So as we talked about gear. The other question that came up is where would we be doing this scooter park? So Gabriel, why don't you talk about at Henderson? So for those that may not be familiar, could you kind of describe the two areas that we've talked about?
We have our hockey courts that aren't used as much as they have been in past years, and I thought that it would be cool to use this big open space that has like very nice quality pavement that we can use to move all of our ramps on. And we are also using our undercover area when it's like raining or snowing or when it's not like the best time to be like out in the open. We can bring it in undercover and everyone can scooter there. And we have another area right beside it that we can use too.
And so that's this area right here. The other day we unpacked. So these are two of the scooters that we did pick up for the school. And we set up some ramps and we did a quick photo shoot of the idea of the kids riding them and the importance of kind of having those helmets and the gear that we're going to talk about next. But right here is just, if you're familiar with Henderson, we've got the sloping grassed area. Over the last few years, the district has done some really great work on cleaning up that area. There used to be a lot of concrete. And so we've got some grass, and then that goes down to the basketball courts down below. And so we've established some safe zones within the school, and that's where we're chatting with kids, is that you can't scooter anywhere you want, but there's going to be those two specific areas, and it's going to be one area or another. It'll either be down below on the hockey courts or be up by the undercovered area. And that partly is a supervision piece. And the kids have been really good about that. Right? There's also a big hill, and we established pretty quick, we're not going to be riding down that hill. And so kids walk their scooters down, or they can stay up top. So let's talk about the gear that we asked them to bring in. So I asked the boys, I said, well, what kind of things do we need? So what kind of things, Evan, what kind of equipment do you think, or did we pick up, and why are those things fun?
So we got helmets, knee pads, like elbow pads, and scooters, a box, a kicker, a 4-way pyramid, and a 2-way pyramid.
Yeah. So these are the lists that Gabriel and I had come up with, and he chatted with his friends, so we went online, and it's amazing how quickly, and the kids are kind of used to it anyways, but we have the 2-way pyramid, kind of that ramp idea that they can actually separate. We got one with a rail that they kind of grind along on the scooters, and then the next one coming up is a grind box, so it's essentially a 2-foot by 4-foot plywood box. That they're able to kind of either go jump up on or to run along the edge. That one we're currently going to have to build because we looked online, didn't really have very many options online. And Gabriel, what is your favorite of the equipment we brought in?
They're all very cool, but I think that my favorite, it's not pictured here, but it is, it's like the one in the top left, except one of the sides has a rail. So you can do multiple things on it, and you can separate all the pieces and use them all differently, and it's just a really cool piece of equipment that you can use in many different ways.
And one of the things we liked about it, as we said, we've got the two spaces, is that it's quite light. And so two boys together or a third boy with them can move them quite easily. And then every day, we're only going to use it at lunch recess because it's got the 30 minutes to do that. But the task will be, some boys will be in charge of taking it down, setting it up, and at the end of recess, bringing it back, locking it in our undercovered area along with the equipment so that it's not left out. But that's going to be part of a leadership piece for the boys to make sure that they're responsible for when it's being used. Which brings us to the next part, which the boys are super excited about this conversation, less excited about this conversation. So as kind of the joke at the school with my office manager, Mrs. Good, when the stuff started arriving, she said, your liability has started to arrive. And so we have lots of laughs about that. So I believe in your agendas is a copy of the piece that I've sent out to parents, which discusses that liability piece. Right? So I worked with Hugh Pritchard, and I put some stuff together and I sent it out to him as well, just to double check to make sure that we're phrasing it right. But we want to make sure at the end of the day, we want to make sure kids are safe. So we have two scenarios at our school. We have kids who have their own scooters and bring their scooters, and then we have kids that don't have scooters and are going to need borrow some of the school's equipment. So in the case of those who have their own scooters, the main thing is all riders have to have a helmet. End of story, right? No helmet, no ride. That's what Mr. Hull says all the time. No helmet, no ride. Okay, so that's the number one thing. Parents will send these back, and it says that in there that your child must have a helmet. Now the school has lots of helmets, so if they can't provide one, we can provide a helmet for them. Now on the other side, if parents don't have a scooter and they're okay with their kids using it, again, it's an opt-in project. It's not like everyone can use it unless you don't want to use it. So we then keep a list. If they use a school district scooter, which are one of these, we purchased 6 scooters for the school, then they have to use a helmet, and then they also have to use the elbow pads and knee pads. And the reason being is that if a parent is sending a child with a scooter, other than the helmet, the parent can decide whether or not their child should be wearing knee pads and elbow pads. But again, the helmet is not optional. I remember having a conversation with a student. He was like, the pros don't ride them. I was like, no, this is the pros' moneymaker. So the pros definitely wear helmets because their moneymaker's up top and they want to make sure they don't break that. So again, knee pads for students that bring their own, and elbow pads are optional, but they do have to have a helmet. But anyone riding school equipment, we do require for them to do that. So we have 6 sets of elbow pads and knee pads, as well as the 6 scooters. So that's that. And again, with that, this is kind of a copy of what I've created and what we'll be sending home tomorrow with parents to sign. So on the left-hand side, it talks about what the expectations are. And so these, I'll just hand these out real quick. We've made these, that's a big version of the little ones. And that's kind of the general idea. And what I did with this is I called down all the kids to the gym. I said, hey guys, let's talk about a scooter park. And what kind of things do we want to make sure happen and don't happen? So it was, they can't budge in line, or they don't, and there was a lot of kind of don't do this, don't do that. So what we did is we flipped it, and we talked about things that they do, right? So all riders are respectful, and all riders will ensure that they eat before and after, rather than don't eat while you're scootering. So we phrase them in a positive way to make sure that kids are aware of what our expectations are at the park. And I think the last one I would add on this is that conversation of scooters and skateboards. Today, I brought with me kids who scooter. However, we do have kids that do like to skateboard. And we recognize that there's a difference between them. And often at the skate park, it can become a bit controversial. Have you guys run into some controversy before at the skate park? And so we've talked about that, and that's why it's also, they're called, all riders. And we're going to work as a group to come up with a name for the park, which is more inclusive than just skates and scooters. Because what if someone comes with rollerblades? I grew up in the 90s, we loved that. Maybe that'll come back. And so we want to make sure that the space that we're creating is inclusive and that kids can enjoy it. Are there any questions for Evan and Gabriel? Any thoughts?
I don't have a question, just
Yeah.
a comment.
Yeah.
Gabriel, I love that you pointed out the repurposing of good, useful concrete, and really being thoughtful about that. I also really liked how you pointed out reconfiguring the material so that you can create all different kinds of things. So thanks for explaining that.
Thank you.
Yeah. And Evan, the way that you brought up safety as the first point when you were asked to make comment, I think that, to Mr. Hull's point, is one of the most important pieces, certainly from the board's perspective. I guess I do have a question. I'm wondering about the turnout so far. What's the level of interest? Clearly you two are interested.
Yeah, we've had, there's been talk about it, and people are definitely pretty excited, but we've had a couple people test them out, and those are all the pictures that have been up there, and they've been so much fun. The kids that have tested them out have loved them. They're really fun, and I just really like the idea that it's not just kids who have scooters at home that can do it.
Yeah, and we had that first meeting, and so we called all the kids down to the office who'd be interested, or down to the gym, and we had between 30 to 40 kids just show up, and that's everywhere from grade 2 to grade 7. So lots of kids excited. I expect to see that there'll be a big uptake, and then probably it'll kind of be the kids that are super interested. But in talking with Dean Thorsell, the district coordinator for physical health and education and active living stuff. He's really excited because oftentimes in the district we focus on sports that are team sports, right? And he said that it would be great to look at ideas to engage kids in activities that they already do, or activities that they may pick up that they can do by themselves. So rather than having to find a team to play volleyball or basketball, which are great sports, scootering is something that a kid can pick up, then he can go home and in his neighborhood just ride and play and have fun. So trying to encourage that active living that can go beyond that 9 to 3 time and allow kids to really enjoy that healthy activity. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. What about a repair clinic? Is there any plans
Yeah.
for that?
So 100%, and so as I kind of said, Evan is our resident pro. That conversation is ongoing, right? About how do we upkeep the equipment that we have, and we often talk about how do we expand this, right? Either new equipment, but definitely looking at how do we ensure that the equipment we have is maintained. And we definitely have students like Evan and Gabriel who are keen and who already have the skills to ensure that they're greased, that the bearings are maintained, things that I have no idea about. And I'm excited to learn from them, and they're very willing to step up into that role and ensure that the equipment is maintained and kept safe and working. I appreciate it. Okay. No further. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt, Evan.
Do you want this off?
No, sure. Oh, it's just-
Oh, leave it
Oh,
on.
leave it on. All right. I'll turn it back.
I wanted to show that, and
We'll look forward to Mr. Hull bringing back the rollerblades and all.
Absolutely, yeah. I'll pull out some short shorts. No, I won't do that. That's not gonna happen. All right. Let's go back. Okay, boys, do you want to head that way? And say scoot.
No helmet, no ride.
No, exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Thank you.
That's how
Okay, so that brings us to question period. Do we have any? Any questions? None? Okay. I'd like to begin today with an expression of gratitude to all who put their names forward for City Council, Regional Director, School Trustee, and Mayor. It can take courage to put your name forward and step outside of your comfort zone. Thanks to each of you for offering your time in this meaningful way. Congratulations to all who have won seats and now have the privilege of serving our community in the respective work that we do. Your commitment is significant. Thank you for putting your time and energy into these jobs as you work toward goals much bigger than our own interests. It is truly appreciated. This November, we welcome our first regular meeting together as our new Board of Education. It was lovely to spend some time getting to know each other during orientation last week. In that process, a few things stood out to me. We are all here because we believe our collective purpose is to make a difference for students and families in our district. We believe that collaboration, communication, and cohesion will form a solid foundation of how best to move forward together. Change is always exciting, and of course there's always a lot of learning and growing along the way. I'm confident that each of us will bring our best selves to this table every time we gather, and that we will represent our community well and be proud of the work that we do as we help to shape the next 4 years. I'm excited for each of us to have this time together, to be a part of a team firmly committed to our purpose and for all that is possible as we move forward through the 22 to 26 term together. November is always a time to remember, to be thoughtful, and reflect on how we honor the people who have served and continue to serve Canada during times of war, conflict, and peace. It was my absolute pleasure to receive an invitation to represent our board at the Remembrance Day Assembly at Westview Elementary, and I know other trustees enjoyed similar experiences at other schools. Students and staff throughout our district put together moving, thoughtful, and beautiful assemblies to honor those who gave themselves to our country for all of us. Thank you to all who planned, participated, and attended Remembrance Day ceremonies throughout the district. You can visit our website to learn more about the SD47 Board of Education, our strategic plan, and the programs and services that we offer. On our website, you'll also find a recently uploaded short video highlighting priorities from the 21-22 school year, an overview of new staff positions implemented this school year to create greater student and educator success in our district. In addition, our website includes some highlights from the 26th Annual Cross Culture Day. This event, organized and hosted by SD47 Indigenous Education Team, the Tla'amin Nation education team, elders, hatchery staff, and many other members of the community, all working together to provide 520 students in grades 3 to 5 an immersive experience to learn about the Tla'amin history, culture, and traditions. You can catch a glimpse of the cross-culture day student experience through our district Instagram, which was really a few minutes very well spent, so I encourage everyone to check that out. Okay. So we'll look for a motion then that the regular meeting agenda of November 16th be adopted as circulated. Jacqueline, looking for a second. Maureen, all in favor? Carried. Okay. And the adoption that the regular meeting minutes of September 14th be adopted as circulated. Jacqueline, and looking to you again, Rob, since you were the only ones there. All in favor? Carried. Just note item 3A, reported closed meeting minutes that the board met in camera to discuss items concerning personnel. And that moves us into correspondence. So there's a number of pieces of correspondence. And 1 second, I just got to catch up on my own agenda here. Okay, so why don't we just move through each of the pieces of correspondence, and then if there's any comment, question, or otherwise, just let me know and we can speak to that. So the first piece of correspondence I'm looking at is the BC Teachers Council regarding the continued implementation for professional standards for BC educators. I just wanted to make a comment about that piece because number 9, or standard number 9, that is included, that is making reference to in this piece of communication. It's exciting to me that our district is in a position to continue to build on the resources and supports available to staff and their commitment, ongoing commitment to meeting the standard. We have a vast amount of cultural activities in this district, and I wondered, Jay, if now would be a good time to ask you to speak to the new staff person in place to support this.
To support the PC.
No, just the recent introduction of the student success staff position to support teachers in schools for the implementation of Indigenous themes and perspectives.
So we have a number of staff that are working with Jessica in schools, and really it's part of our overall equity in action plan. And those people, some are teachers and some are common cultural workers, and they're going into all schools to offer cultural lessons through Common. And then we also have teachers who are actually connecting with Indigenous students and having a success plan and connecting with their parents. And that's an expansion because in the past most of those services have been at Brooks and James Thompson, and we've now through the board and our strategic plan have gone to try to expand that to all schools. And we'd like the language to be expanded to all schools, but we're still short on language teachers, and I know that Cohon is working on that, and so we're ready to be able to expand the language program.
Okay, the next piece of communication is Honorable Whiteside to the Ministers Robinson and Whiteside related to inflationary cost pressures. No comments. Okay. Teacher education programs in rural districts from Carolyn Brody at BCSTA. Okay. Funding for exempt compensation grid, BCSTA to Minister Whiteside. We have a number of BCSTA to Whiteside, so you can tell there's a bit of a gap, and then we kind of go back and forth for a response from different agencies to BCSTA. One question I had in the next piece is to BCSTA regarding teacher education programs in rural districts. And I wondered if, I know there are a lot of communities considered far more remote than ours, but I'm curious to know if we're aware of a local level of interest for a local cohort, or if that happened.
We've done that with VIU in the past, and we had a number of teaching assistants who went into the teaching program and ended up leaving, being a teaching assistant to be now teachers in our district. So we do have a partnership with VIU, and whenever they feel they can have enough for a cohort, they run one for us here locally.
Okay, so they maintain a list of interested, okay. Good to know.
Well, the SFU program, that was 16 students, and that was full certification for teachers. And I know that was 2 years in the planning to get it through regulation, because they want students to spend time on campus. And it was the first time, I think, that the ministry has allowed the full program to run in a rural district. And the feedback and the data from that was overwhelmingly positive. And teachers, I know from the program, advocated for it to happen in other communities. It's just change of dean, and there was no will after that.
I think if there's anything we can do to lend our voice to, because the way I understand it is, it's the ministry that often has the concerns. Like, they believe that teachers should be at a university, right? So for instance, like, I'm currently in the UBC Rural and Remote Education Program, and my understanding was that it was really difficult to get the program running because there were concerns that can teachers learn online, but also identifying, like, my understanding is that when the 2016 with the Supreme Court case, when it restored language, was like a lot of rural communities had teachers were pulled into urban settings. Like, that was just conveyed at the BCPC conference I was just at, when they had a chat on retention and recruitment. Yeah, that a lot of teachers moved from rural to urban, so it created an even larger need for teachers in rural communities. So if there's anything we can do to, I mean, on one hand, you're right, we don't have the same issues as, say, Kayipkit, or, you know, advocating as a like, I think if every district advocates as a coordinated effort to the ministry,
I think that's a really good point, Rob, and I know it doesn't line up in the agenda package necessarily, but there is a piece of communication here from the BCSTA urging the government to do just that. And so one of the pieces of coordinated communication had arisen from the AGM at BCSTA, so that is all 60 districts working in coordination to lobby the government for that.
Mm-hmm. I think though there's bigger issues of in very small remote communities, they're never going to have necessarily a program to have teachers become teachers, because there's a lot of people on letters of permission within those. So I think it's really these two different pieces. One is how do you retain people. That's a much bigger issue with all our colleagues in the north, is retaining. People go up, they have a year, and you're right, the porting of seniority makes it easier for people to move. And then the other is how do you have these remote communities be able to have 2 or 3 or 4 people wanting to be teachers? You know, how does that happen? It also doesn't have any correlation necessarily that they're staying in that community.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest problem, is the in and out in all of those communities. And some of our colleagues have over 50% of their teachers are letter of permission teachers, and we're certainly, you know, we can be considered rural and remote, but we definitely don't have those challenges that other communities do.
Well, the other issue too is a lot of schooling obviously is in urban centers. So for people to go away from their families or whatnot, cost of living. So for people to actually stay in their community and go to school is like fundamental.
Thank you. Okay, the next piece is to Carolyn Brody, BCSTA, from Minister Whiteside, and it's around regarding universal washrooms and change rooms in schools. And I know that we've had this conversation around this table, but perhaps before, definitely before some of you were sitting here, maybe even all. But I wondered if we could invite Steve to comment about where we've been able to include that in our district, or plans for upgrades in the last few years.
Sure. We put, not within the scope of what's suggested here. We've been designated washrooms in every facility that are deemed to be universal. Our largest school, Brooks, we haven't undertaken any major renovations. A couple of elementary schools where we've taken bigger renovations over the last few years, we haven't changed the structure. It's still two multi-person washrooms with a single universal washroom. There hasn't been a board direction to change that configuration, but I think provincially, it's worth noting the 5 letters, they're all as responses to advocacy letters that came out of the AGM.
Yeah, and so on that, the same with the BC Hydro 100 kilowatt meter net metering caps in all public school facilities. So I know that we, obviously Brooks, you can see how loaded the rooftop is, but how do we fit in this scenario?
I believe what they're referring to is the net metering. So if you have a solar system, you can get a grid tie. So you put the solar system and it basically banks energy that it's a credit against your hydro account. So if you've got if it was a house across the street, for example, it's got a dozen panels, it's just reducing the cost because it's creating its own energy. So, but it's capped out at this 100 kilowatts. So I think what they're getting at, if they didn't, there's some places that would like to explore quite a big commercial system that would be larger than the hydro cap. For context, our one at Brooks is just under the cap. It's I think it's 86 kilowatts or something like that. And the one for context at Edgehill is really more of the size of a residential, and the one that that is not complete at Westview is bigger than Edgehill but nowhere near Brooks. But they're all capped. You couldn't do it any bigger than what we did at Brooks currently.
Right.
Without being under a whole, it's just a whole different setup, so it's not practical.
Right, and I can imagine what that setup would look like given what Brooks looks like and being under that. Okay, thanks, Steve. The next letter is to BCSTA from Minister Whiteside around working together for additional funding that may be made available by the federal government. So it's good to see our association working on our behalf to move forward with this advocacy. Another piece from BCSTA to BCSTA from Minister Whiteside regarding the updating of some old documents that are in need of revision. So I know we've had conversation here around the documents of a BC graduate in need of a refresh, the School Act regarding the acknowledgement of traditional territories, barriers for students with precarious or no immigration status. So it's good to see that there is some action and interest and appetite in moving forward to update these guiding documents, because in 10, 15, 20 years, certainly the language needs a refresh around many of those things. The next one, standards for indoor air quality. Okay. And one more, Minister Whiteside to BCSTA, and I think we've had so many of these just because we had a bit of a gap, and then the action arising out of our AGM, which is timing, and then summer, and only having one board meeting since, so it's not typical to have all of these at one go. Anyway, it's talking about request for funding for universal food programs, and of course that would be, it can't arrive quickly enough to have something like that. I wonder, Jay, if you want to, or actually you're going to talk about this later, aren't you? Okay, moving on. Okay, so I think, was that it for?
I believe that's the balance of the incoming
Yes.
correspondence.
Okay, thank you.
For a motion to receive.
Motion that the correspondence item listed 4A to 4G be received. Jacqueline, need a second. Kirsten, all in favor? Thank you. Okay, outgoing correspondence. Really pleased to read item 5A, SD47 to Bartholomew. So I'm glad that we're in a position to continue to support the summer festival. Certainly, although it is in the summer, the benefit to our students and families and community is without a doubt, you can't, it's unmeasurable probably. But I do wonder if we could ballpark or what we're looking at in terms of cost to support What's our in-kind contribution?
Well, because we don't have any, the support, similar to BC Bike Race, they're all at no cost to the board, so really, I suppose if you try to estimate the wear and tear on using the equipment for some use that is not our own, but there's really no cost. We just don't charge a rental fee for the theater. They provide their own drivers most years, and they use the bus and pay for their own fuel. And then the music instruments and things like that. It's just equipment that's under a shared use agreement we reciprocate agreement with the academy anyway. And then because it's a small community, and with the work of the academy, many of our staff work with the academy, so it's really the same people doing both projects.
Okay, I just wondered how valuable the in-kind contribution of the district is to the.
Oh, I see. I think it's pretty immeasurable what it is for them, because if we were trying to charge costs, renting 5 buses for 5 days in the theater, it's thousands of dollars anyway. I can't say because we've never charged.
Yeah, you'd have to go, what are private bus rates?
That's okay, we don't need to answer.
Lots.
Lots, got you. We contribute lots and we're happy to do so. Okay, other pieces of outgoing correspondence, we don't need a motion for that, so that moves us to Jay's superintendent's report.
First of all, I don't know if you can set that up on the next table, I can talk about something else. But we wanted to just take 10 minutes and look at, Christy had been working on, we've been looking at different ways to engage with the community and get some discussion around our strategic plan and our FESL document. And so she embarked on putting a video together that people can review quickly to get an idea of how we're doing. So I thought with all of her work, it's worthwhile for us to take 10 minutes and look at it, and then you can decide between myself, I know who's here, Kristen and Allison, who's getting the Academy Award. It's definitely not me, I'm definitely the talking head. But it's just, as you said, it was a goal of the board around communication, and it's just, we're trying different ways to see if we can engage a little better than reading a dry, long document. And it kind of did the trick, but I think we could be a little flashier in the future, a little more engaging.
Are you talking about the video that I referenced in?
Yes.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Was this for your interview today?
In School District 47, we have a commitment to student success and measuring success and the outcomes. Each year, the board prepares and submits a report to the Minister of Education on learning outcomes with specific criteria in the reporting. The annual report reports on our strategic plan, and that plan is developed through performance and growth plans in all of our schools that lead to data and outcomes around student success. The goals and outcomes of our strategic plan is meant to be a collaborative effort. It starts with students first. Then we consult with parents, teachers, stakeholders to develop our plan, which aligns with the Minister of Education's goals for the product. The board's 3 themes are learner success, engagement and connectedness, and organizational sustainability. We have many goals and outcomes. The key priorities last year were Indigenous education, early learning, and mental health.
Within the context of early learning, one of the tools we use to measure how our students enter kindergarten is the Early Years Development Instrument, which is actually done in collaboration with UBC and Health Program. This tool provides us with information about our incoming kindergarten students and indicates that many of our students experience vulnerability, in particular within the areas of social and emotional. As a school district, we're committed to ensuring that we address these needs so that the children and families in our community are able to thrive. One of the programs we've implemented is the Just Before program, which is a preschool program operating in 2 of our elementary schools. Another new program that we've implemented is the Seamless Kindergarten program, which will be running in one of our elementary schools. This involves 2 early childhood educators who provide before and after school care, as well as providing support during their time in the classroom. This program is really exciting because it allows children to stay in the same space with their before and after school care as within their classroom, which really provides that continuous support. We're also excited about the Strengthening Early Years to Kindergarten Transitions, which is an amazing program that involves collaborating with community partners, kindergarten teachers, preschool teachers, and it provides us the opportunity to have those important conversations so that we know that the students entering kindergarten are supported in whatever ways that they need.
Research has informed us that mental health and wellness is a key to student and staff success. We've hired a coordinator of health and wellness to work with our schools on mental health issues and to get students active and physical. We have committed to trauma-informed practice in all of our schools and continue to provide professional development and in-service.
Mental health has been a priority for our school district for several years. The pandemic has served to increase and highlight the need for us to be supporting and promoting mental health in schools for our staff and our students and our broader community. Our areas of focus are mental health literacy for students, staff, and families, and to improve our culture of acceptance, tolerance, mindfulness, and respect. The Ministry of Education and Childcare has released 2 documents over the past few years that help to guide our practice and to help inform our practice and how we support the mental health and well-being needs of students and staff. Another area of focus is mental health in the classroom, which encompasses core competencies as part of BC's curriculum, Indigenous knowledge and perspective, as well as physical and mental health. While mental health remains a strategic priority, our local data tells us that we need to continue our commitment to creating safe and caring school environments where all of our students feel welcome, feel a sense of belonging, feel connected to adults at school, and feel cared for and safe. Over the course of the past year, we have continued our promotion of the Everyday Anxiety Strategies for Educators program, or the EASE, for K-7, and also the newly launched EASE 8-12. The school district has purchased resources that are SOGI inclusive for all of our school libraries, and we have also created a sexual health educator position within our districts, in which part of the programming focuses on healthy relationships and on mental well-being.
We are particularly proud of our common language program that we're able to offer in elementary schools and in our high schools for credit. This program of language is also recognized by post-secondary institutions for entrance.
Indigenous education is profoundly relevant. We know we're not meeting Indigenous student needs, and some of the ways that we are addressing that is through the Equity in Action Project, evaluating where gaps may be and how to address them. Some of the recommendations have already been met from our first 2 years of the project. We've hired a number of new staff to support both Indigenous student culture and student success, as well as supporting our teachers and making sure they have access to relevant Indigenous pedagogies and ways of teaching and learning that honors Indigenous perspective and values Indigenous worldview. Having things like welcome polls creates a sense of belonging and presence for Indigenous kids. That's going to help other students that aren't Indigenous recognize their place and where they're situated in the world, but it's also going to create a sense of pride for Indigenous kids. We're putting in some of the building blocks that are going to hopefully lead to systemic change through sense of belonging and presence, and enhancing our teacher support through curricular supports from experts and knowledge keepers. So we're going to try to bring some of those back that were really spearheaded by the Tla'amin community. You know, our elders and our ancestors have been doing things in a certain way for a long time, and it's now providing a roadmap to where public education can be. Some of the work that's been happening in the district, such as a really collaborative process with Tla'amin Nation and VIU to create the Traditional Skill Builder program, which is basically a cultural immersion for students to learn core academic credentials that contribute to their graduation, as well as doing that learning in a really culturally relevant way that it has revitalized some practices that have historically been lost, and then also providing students opportunity for that hands-on relevant learning that's meaningful to them. The refocusing of our support workers into CHEP workers, which in the Ayajutan language means auntie or uncle, and then it kind of captures that essence of an adult who cares and has a vested interest in your well-being and success, and it also recognizes the individuality of the workers and recognizes their unique gifts. You know, not all aunties are the same and not all uncles are the same, but they each have something meaningful to teach you.
Our vision for student success in School District 47 is really about ensuring that every student maximizes their full potential. We want to make sure that every one of our students graduates and crosses that stage with dignity, purpose, and options. One area we're particularly pleased with is our 5-year graduation rate. The 5-year graduation rate is what the ministry uses for students entering grade 8 and how long it takes them to grad with their requirements in the graduation program. So over the last 5 years, we've been able to raise our 5-year graduation rate almost 25%. So that's one area we're really happy about. We're very fortunate in School District 47 to be able to offer so many different programs to our students in the graduation program. From academics, electives, dual credit programs, specialty programs, we have something for every student. And that's an area that we continue to focus on and grow and add new programs each year. There truly is something for everyone. And ultimately, we want our students to graduate with the skills and the knowledge to go into all the different directions that they would want to pursue.
I'm optimistic about the future. After years of decline, we're now managing growth. We have excellent staff, students, and we're able to add programs and services to better meet the needs of our students, our staff, and our community.
I loved it.
There you go.
Yes.
There's a whole bunch of tomatoes or yeah. So yeah, and so thank you to Christy putting that together with Tony Papa from our digital film school. So hopefully it's something we can push out to people when they're wondering about what goes on in a quick 10 minutes rather than going through the whole strategic planning document, but people can always dig deeper on our website.
One of the first things that I do when I'm putting together remarks is go to our website, and I got to say, the last few have been a lot easier to do with content like this there to be able to make reference to. So it's a testament to the work that Christy and all of you are doing.
So the next piece is the Student and Family Affordability Fund. This was something that we were given, thankfully, but it was a little late in terms of planning, and so we asked our principals to go and talk to the PACs and their staffs and submit what they think they would like to spend the money on, and so that's what you see in the table, the areas of spending, and of course if they come up with other things, there's still other opportunities, but we just wanted to filtered through here because there are some criteria around what it is that you can spend, but the intention was to leave costs that parents normally have the burden of with inflation and other pieces. So it wasn't just for vulnerable students, which normally happens, it's for any students. And so things like Brooks has eliminated costs for sports teams or going on those kinds of trips. So you see every school has used some of it for their meal program, but we also already have a robust program that the board was committed to before this fund. We put some funding in place to all schools to make sure that they could have healthy meals available for anyone who should need it, and we also put some staff fund into all of the schools to support meals program. So that will free up this money for them to use for other purposes. And so you came up with a bit of a formula so you can see what the money that was provided to each of the schools. We do have money left over, and that's really why we wanted to have an opportunity for the board, and knowing there's a new board, that there might be ideas that you have that we can use the money to support families. So you can give me those ideas or throw them out here if you have them. We're also at the district level. I've been working with the complex to offer something for free on Pro D days and at March break, which they're committed to giving us a proposal on what that would look like. And it looks like it may be something like free skating and swimming for that day, but we also want to look at if they have a day camp, and that would be specific to targeted students who really could use that kind of experience. And so that's what we're working on. And then we put for board discussion, these are just some other ideas because it wouldn't come out of the schools. It's really whether we want to look at creating opportunities through this fund in the summer or other supplements for vulnerable families. And if it's something, we also wanted to go to the DPAC, which is, the meeting is coming up next week. And we've asked them if they have other ideas that would be district-wide kinds of initiatives, or are we missing, a population of families or parents that could use money for a specific purpose. It's pretty wide open. It's really to cover costs that you would normally incur in going to school that we could cover. So an example is at Kelly Creek. Jen's looking at, there's some families that they don't fit into the busing very well, but they have difficulty with transportation, and whether or not that we can provide them with transportation assistance, which we normally wouldn't because they don't qualify for the bus, but they have transportation issues. So it's something that she wants to look at and supporting some of those families. So kind of these are a lot of ideas, but you may have others that we can explore.
You mentioned each of these ideas listed here that having been in consultation with the PACs at each of these schools. Okay, and then what would we anticipate them coming from DPAC?
It's more of from a district-wide, these are all school-specific. So DPAC would be talking about, are there things that are something you should offer everybody, and that would come from here. Say, hey, you're all doing this schools, we have some other money, and I just don't have any idea what it might be. It's to give them an opportunity, because that's the role to look from a district perspective. Is there something missing? And that's the same with the board to look at. These are what all the schools are doing. Are there things that you think, after looking at that there's costs that maybe we could explore covering, or that we should explore for families or students?
Is Tony going to bring that to, like, say, the health committee for ideas too?
Yeah, we could. I hadn't thought of that, but yeah, definitely. We've already worked with Cohom, and we're supporting an after-school support program with the nation. So we're using some of that money for that.
Do you have like a deadline for when? For ideas,
No, I
or?
think it's supposed to be spent this year, or is it? Did they say? I don't know.
Yeah, the intent was that it's, well, for sure will be one-time money and intended to be spent this year and not be carried over. It comes as a special purpose fund, and any special purpose fund, traditionally they reserve the right to take the money back, and I don't think that's the the intent. And we'll see as the school year goes on, but there is, I believe there's a bit of a, I'll call it a lobby, but from colleagues going back to government to recognize it's a lot of money to spend specific to this purpose in such a finite period of time, so kind of hoping that it can carry over and then those plans can carry through for another year. So keeping in mind just this allocation of $100 to students was a preliminary allocation to just so schools could keep going, and then the idea would be once we finish our planning we could push more money to schools, but we already support food programs in schools. This is an enhancement, so it's quite a bit of money. I'm not convinced that with the list you have there that they could spend that much money on those things in the remaining 8 months of school. So hopefully the money can carry over and with more planning support the initiative for another school year.
Yeah, I think too, it's important for us to recognize that if it is one-time funding, when we do certain things like, we had anecdotal evidence of spring break and summer opportunities being something that parents had a desire for. But then if we implement those things with the idea that we're using one-time funding over 1 or 2 years, then what is the board looking at, in the years to follow? And so that was just my comment about that. But also, I wonder, because the evidence from parents is anecdotal, how can we better support PACs to actually gauge what families are in need of? Like, we know that PACs aren't necessarily a fulsome representation of the parent body, and I wonder if we as a district board then could put some structure in place or some thinking around how we could better support DPAC before they meet next week, to be able to go back to their PACs and then out to parents, so that we're appropriately using all of the parent systems to be able to collect feedback in a meaningful way to help inform decisions there. Okay, great.
I'll talk to my team at work and
Sure, that'd be great.
also
That'd be great.
with that inconsistent and see if there's things coming up for them.
Are there other groups, Chaplain, that you think would have sort of, like I think about family
I
place,
think the
I
whole
think Charlie
committee is
family.
a good
Yeah.
kind of one-stop shop.
Oh, they're all represented there.
There's lots
Mhm.
of representation there, yeah.
Yeah, and you have to, I didn't provide all the criteria in the background, just what we were planning, but if you looked at the criteria and the intent, it's not intended to create new programs or anything
No.
either. It's really to offset the inflationary costs.
Right.
They're currently bearing, so it's not easy to do out of the school.
Are any of these projects tied to school gardens?
We have our school garden programs. We have it through this fund particularly, use it to support school gardens. But we do resource our school garden program at all schools.
But I like your comment though, Maureen, because I think too that there's always opportunity to have capacity building in terms of the volunteer engagement of that. Like, I know Vanessa does look for a cohort of volunteers for each of the schools where she does her landed learning, and those roles are really valuable in, those programs being successful in the schools that they're at. So maybe, because it is one-time funding, maybe there could be some focus around capacity building for the, not necessarily even parent volunteers, but creating that sense of community around food and around gardens, and then also not having to look forward in years to follow how we'll continue to fund that. If we could put a bunch of dollars into really amping that up for a period of time, and then hope for some continuity around what we can achieve after that. School gardens, I would love it.
Well, the thing about school gardens is that the cost is upfront, so if it's a 1 year, it fits very well. If you're going to put a greenhouse, you're going to expand a garden area, and then it can serve for many years after that with minimal amount of input.
Okay, and so if you have any ideas, you can just email me or bring them to the committee of the whole, and any of them will kind of explore and filter through. If we get it for next week, I'd filter it through back and see what their thoughts were, and then I can talk to you a little more about how I think we can do that communication before next week. I'm just not sure whether we could do that, and we could send the questions over to them. But we have time, so we can even have a discussion in APAC and say, how do we reach out to make sure that we're reaching all the right families?
Yeah, I think it's a really fantastic opportunity for us to engage families, and it would be unfortunate to kind of miss the boat on that just because we're so wrapped up sort of in what we're already hoping to achieve.
And I think that's why we left a healthy amount in that pot, because we knew that, you know, there was time maybe schools wanted to get at it, and we thought, let's hold some back because some great ideas might come out of more engagement.
Is the criteria available online?
Yeah, and we can send it to you. It was in a previous package when we received when we received the grant, but we can just push it out to you so you see what the criteria is.
I was just gonna say, in a previous agenda with the previous George board, this was brought up.
Yes.
And the question was asked how to best engage,
Yes.
and the decision was PACS.
Yes.
So.
Thanks,
so
Rob.
just-
Okay. The next is the enrollment that's now solidified after the 30th, which is regular enrollment report. The next, I just thought for your interest, is to see what our average class size is, because we have to send that to the ministry. So I just thought it's an interesting stat for you to be aware of. And the last piece is our suspension, exclusion, and seclusion report, and I actually added for new trustees, because people ask about seclusion and exclusion and what is it. And it was a change from the ministry. In the past, we've only had to report on suspensions, and then there's a lot of discussion that a lot of students are secluded at school or excluded at school, and really it is a suspension, and it should be reported and formalized. And for seclusion, we don't have any. It's incredibly rare, and it's mostly for inclusive education, and it would be when a student is secluded because of safety reasons. But even that doesn't count as reportable, because if it's in an IEP and agreed upon with the parents as a strategy, but we don't have that. We don't use that strategy other than in incredibly severe cases, which I can only think of two in the last few years where that strategy is needed to be used. But it wouldn't be reported because it is in the IEP. The exit is with exclusion, and exclusion for people in our system would know that as in-school suspensions. So in the past, those were not formalized and reported on. So if a student says something happened at recess and said, okay, you'll be coming and sitting outside my office for an hour and bring your work with you, that's considered an in-school suspension, and we need to inform parents and report it to the board, and then it would appear on the report. And that we are just getting better at because it's new, and so I suspect that we have a few more than being reported. And I talked to principals just yesterday as a reminder that when you have those in schools, to make sure, because they don't have to have a formal letter that goes with it, they just have to inform parents. So it's easy when they have to do a formal letter because it just gets CC'd up here, and so they just have to remind themselves to have a system when they have an in-school suspension to send that up to Anna so we can report it to you. So I just wanted you to be aware of that's why it's the way it's laid out.
Would you say October is an exceptional month
For
in terms of the total suspensions?
Not particularly. No.
I feel like October was more last year too.
Yeah, sometimes it's really an incident where there could be a whole number of students involved in something where we would have suspensions, like if there were a fight and then there were all kinds of students around watching or videoing or whatever it is, and they would all also be part of that. So, you know, the ebb and flow is really around those kinds of activities, but it can really vary month to month. And if it was something very out of the normal, I would be letting you know.
Thanks,
And
Jay.
that's my report. Trying to make it easy on you, first meeting.
Thanks for that. Motion that the superintendent of schools report be received as presented. Ross and Maureen?
No, sorry.
No, yeah, question?
I missed my opportunity there.
No.
I did have a question about the physical restraint. Do we have anyone in district who's trained in positive behavior intervention?
Many.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Because I think the certification for they can then share that training with anyone in the district. And I know when I worked with it, the value wasn't necessarily around the restraint. It was helping teachers understand that they could intervene and de-escalate. And that was the learning for the district. It was really valuable. It's expensive, but worth it.
Yeah, and we did it a few years ago, and we've had refreshers. And I agree, having people in schools with that prevention makes a big difference.
Yeah.
But as I said, we don't use physical restraint for any of our, it would be very, very rare.
Yeah.
Okay, who is the mover for that? Rob, and second? Jack. All in favor? Maureen? Yeah, okay, carried. Go ahead, Steve.
Okay, I just have a single item. This is a one-page report that's included most months throughout the school year. It summarizes it's a bit of a hybrid report. You'll see when we get to the amended budget in January that it lays out our spending by operating, special purpose, and capital. This hybrid report is all our operating and consolidates a few of the special purpose funds. So an example is the Classroom Enhancement Fund, which is a little over $2 million, so not an immaterial amount, is solely used for employing additional teachers, and it's not practical. There's no internal interest for us to break out 18 teachers from the other teachers, so we pull all those costs into operating for the purpose of our day-to-day spending. So this report that summarizes the almost $40 million is predominantly operating, but again, a couple special purpose funds, and it compares the actual spending against the budget. And really the indicator for trustees is the last number on the far right bottom of the page, 75%. So it's always, that's saying there's 75% of the budget remaining as at the end of October, which is similar to the same period the year before. So regardless of the size of your budget, if your spending or burn rate is similar to the year before, you're on track to land similarly where we did the year before. So I'm comfortable where it's at now, but it's quite early, and then again we'll amend this in January with updated numbers for February. That's the balance of my report.
Any questions for Steve? There being none, motion that the Secretary Treasurer's report be received as presented. Jacqueline? Maureen? All in favor? Carried. Okay, other business today, we just have committee appointments, and just like to take a minute to say thank you, everyone. I've never actually had that experience where there's been so much interest for all of the committees, so thank you for that. I've done my best to make sure everyone has at least two that they put their hand up for, but the good thing to note is that there'll be 3 more rotations of this exercise in your term, so we'll have opportunity to turn it around again. Okay, so trustee representatives to school, Brooke Secondary, Maureen. I've emailed that to you, Anna, so that you can just.
Oh, it's okay, I'm just putting initials down for now.
Edgell Elementary, Jacqueline Henderson, myself, James Thompson.
Sorry, can you just go back to Edgehill?
Sorry, Jacqueline.
Jacqueline, yeah. Henderson yourself?
Yes.
Yep.
James Thompson, Maureen.
Yep.
Kelly Creek, Rob. Partners in Education, Kirsten. Texada, Rob. Westview, Kirsten. Okay, and then committees of the board, Education and Curriculum Change, Maureen. French Advisory Committee, Rob. Indigenous Education, myself. Health Committee, Jacqueline. Joint Management Committee, Kirsten. Labor Negotiations, Rob. Outdoor Learning Sustainability Advisory Committee, Jacqueline. Board appointees, the first two were elected earlier. Chamber of Commerce, myself. District Parent Advisory Council, myself. Northern Sunshine Coast Ferry Advisory Council, Maureen. Powell River Community Action Team, Jacqueline. Social Action and Planning Advisory Committee, Kirsten. And SOGI, Kirsten. Okay, so that being out of the way, that moves us to question period. Do we have any?
Yes, please.
Okay.
I think I heard this when you were talking about it, Jane, but will the district also be providing transportation for vulnerable kids at spring break activities?
It's not something we had considered, but yeah, it's definitely something we should.
It's something that would concern teachers because of kids who just can't get to town.
Sure, I'll make a note of that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Couple of other questions. How are the data from Pi Island Discovery included in class averages?
That's a good question, Izzy. So
Because it's not just the bricks and mortar schools.
right, we report on everyone, so I'd have to go back to the template to have a look, and I can share it with you.
Thank you,
Yeah.
thank you. And just a request, I couldn't, and I'm sure Paul couldn't either, get a list of all the committee assignments. Could we be sent that
For sure.
before fairly soon?
Yeah, you bet.
It'll be on the website in the morning.
Yeah.
I'm
We'll
not
put it
sure
on
what
the
I'm
website.
signed up for, so that'll be helpful.
That would be super. Thank you.
Thanks, Izzy. And Jay, a quick question on that. Could we also ask that staff liaise with all of the committee leads so that they're aware of the changes?
Oh, definitely.
Okay. Yeah, okay, perfect. And that brings
Make
us.
notes back there.
Got it. You're the people. Thank you. Media question period, Paul.
I thank the chairperson for the opportunity. First, congratulations to everybody on your election to office. It's a big deal to stand for office and a big responsibility, and I know you will all acquit yourselves well. Congratulations to the chair, to the vice chair, and to Trustee Hill also for your appointments today. I'm hoping the secretary treasurer can send me a link to the video that was shown. I'd like to do a story, and if I have provided that, I can embed it in my online story. With regard to outgoing correspondence, item 5B, School District 47 wrote to the minister and expressed a desire for more funds for mental health and that kind of thing. I'm wondering if the school district has articulated any prospective plans for moving forward with any particular allotments that may come forward, or if there's any thought that's been given to how that could be implemented if the ministry was cooperative.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, Paul, and I'll ask Jay to speak to the many initiatives we already have in place with a focus on mental health and well-being and what that could look like with new partnerships or new dollars. No?
Thanks,
So
Jay.
you ready?
Well, I think it would just, it's really the conversation around that we know that mental health is a really prevalent issue, and we've addressed it in many ways throughout the school district, and we put positions in place, but we didn't, our plan isn't that they necessarily be ongoing positions, that they would build capacity with teachers, but we certainly know that would be one area where we would have some kind of permanent person coordinating and working with schools. But right now the plan is for a number of those coordinators is to build capacity in teachers and give them the tools that they need. But we know that we can always use a whole level of teacher coordination that can support teachers, but that's not always, we're not always able with the budget to be able to do that or sustain it over time.
So some thought has been lent then to ways that things could be expanded in this school district.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I thank the chair or the superintendent for that response. I had some questions about the Student and Family Affordability Fund, but those were answered during the presentation. District enrollment as of September 30th, 22, there was a difference of 113 students over 2021, I gather, from my reading of that. Would that be full-time equivalent, or is that heads?
What we're reading here is heads. Heads.
Okay. Has there been any determination about what the increase may be due to? It's obviously a good situation for the school district.
And I think it's spread across, but I don't know, do you remember what our biggest?
One of them are pie.
So our PI program is where the majority of the expansion is. But we did have expansion among all of the schools, small. But if you're to pick one, it would be PI and Allo. Do you know the difference?
I could go.
Approximately.
I could find out and let him know. Is it there?
Yeah, actually, it's mostly
It's on the report.
bricks and mortar elementary.
Right, just across the board.
The 77 heads in bricks and mortar, only 2 were in Brooks, so the 75 that
Spread
across
across.
the 6 elementary.
And 26.
Right, 20 and 26 implies, so really it is across the board.
Across the
Mostly
board.
elementary.
Are there any capacity issues you're facing at this particular time, or are you able to accommodate the increase fairly well?
We have been, but some schools have been declared full and had to move to other schools where we didn't have capacity, because our normal process is you would have a spot at your home school if you register by your deadline, which is March 31st, and then after March 31st, it's first come, first serve, and when a school is full, then we move to the next nearest school when we don't have capacity.
I thank the superintendent for that. District class size average report, I assume those are within legislated mandates. I'm wondering if the class sizes are viewed by the district as being good, or would they like to see them smaller? I'm not sure what the thoughts are on that.
I think we would characterize it as within legislation. I don't know whether, I mean, anytime it could be much smaller, we would be happy. But the formula really dictates the number of students that we have in classes and our capacity in schools, but certainly we would welcome much smaller classes.
Those are my questions, Chair. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thanks, Paul. Okay, there being no further business, motion to adjourn.